New York City had always shimmered with dreams, but for Lila Monroe, it was a terrifying blur of lights, noise, and unfamiliar faces. She stepped out of the cab, hugging her tote bag tightly, and looked up at the towering glass facade of the Monarch Hotel, an ultra-luxurious five-star haven nestled in Manhattan. Her best friend had pulled a miracle by booking her a night here using unused reward points. Lila had a job interview the next morning, and this was her first night in the city, alone, scared, and completely overwhelmed. The grand lobby smelled of vanilla and polished marble. Lila checked in nervously, barely able to keep her hands from trembling, as the receptionist smiled and handed her the key card. Suite 1703, she murmured to herself, dragging her small suitcase to the elevator. The numbers blurred in her mind as she blinked back exhaustion and anxiety. She hated traveling. She hated interviews. And most of all, she hated how lonely she felt in that moment. The elevator dinged, and she stepped out onto the 17th floor. Walking down the plush, carpeted hallway, she found what she thought was her suite, 1705. She stared at it for a moment, frowning slightly. Wait, wasn't it 1703? Her thoughts were foggy, her heels pinched. She needed rest. With a nervous breath, she tapped the key card. The door clicked open. What she stepped into wasn't a typical hotel room. It was a palace. Crystal chandeliers, leather sofas, and floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view took her breath away. She blinked. Wow, these reward points are something else, she whispered. Then she heard the sound. A low rustle. Someone clearing their throat behind her. She turned and froze. A tall man stood near the minibar, glass in hand, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers. His dark hair was tousled like he'd run his fingers through it in frustration. His icy blue eyes narrowed as they scanned her face. And for a moment, the silence between them stretched like a live wire. Ethan Cole had been waiting for a model, just a contact his PR team insisted he meet before a gala event. He was used to women showing up uninvited. But the girl who had just entered wasn't dressed for seduction. She wore a simple navy blouse, her auburn hair slightly damp from the drizzle outside, and her eyes, wide, doe-like and terrified, were looking at him like he might throw her out the window. "Oh my God," Lila gasped, taking a clumsy step back. I'm so sorry. I must have, I must have gotten the wrong room. I thought this was, oh no, this isn't my room, is it?" Ethan blinked, lips twitching slightly at the pure panic on her face. "Clearly not," he said dryly. "I swear I didn't mean to intrude. I'm not a thief or anything. I mean, I didn't even touch anything. I'm just tired and I—" She trailed off, her cheeks flaming. Ethan raised a brow. "Relax. No need to call security on yourself." Lila looked like she was ready to bolt. Her fingers fumbled with the key card and her voice cracked as she tried again to apologize. "I'll just leave. Right now. So sorry again, sir." "Stay," Ethan said suddenly. Lila stopped. "What?" He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was the quiver in her voice. Maybe it was the fact that she wasn't faking anything. Not the fear, not the innocence, not the humility. He'd spent years surrounded by liars and gold diggers. This girl, she didn't even know who he was. "Just for a moment," he added casually. "I was expecting someone else, but I'd rather talk to someone real for once." Lila hesitated. "I don't think that's appropriate." "I'm Ethan," he said, stepping forward and extending a hand. She looked at it like it might burn her, then slowly took it. "Lila. Lila Monroe." Her hand was soft, unsure. Ethan felt a strange pang in his chest. He hadn't felt that in years. He gestured for her to sit. She did, perching on the edge of the leather couch like a bird ready to fly. "So, you're new in town?" She nodded. "Just moved here. I have an interview tomorrow at a publishing firm. I'm not used to places like this." "Neither am I," he said, surprising himself. "But I live here." Her eyes widened. "Oh." Silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was warm. Ethan leaned against the armrest, watching her. Every fiber of him told him to keep his guard up, to shut down, to keep this a polite 5-minute chat and move on. But he didn't want to. Lila's nervous babble filled the room, and he listened, truly listened, for the first time in years. Finally, she stood. I really should go. I've caused enough trouble. He rose too. You didn't. Their eyes met again. Her lips parted slightly. His gaze softened. She turned and walked to the door, her voice trembling. Thanks for not kicking me out. Ethan chuckled softly. Thank you for walking into the wrong room. As the door closed behind her, Ethan stood in silence, glass still in hand. He didn't know who Lila Monroe really was, but he had a feeling. She'd just walked into far more than his suite. She'd walked into his story. Ethan Cole wasn't a man easily distracted. In his world of sharp suits, colder boardrooms, and tighter smiles, distractions were liabilities. Emotions were weaknesses. And women? Women were trouble, wrapped in lipstick and lies. But that night, as the city's skyline blinked quietly outside his penthouse windows, Ethan stared out into the dark, and all he could think about was the girl who had stumbled into his suite. Lila Monroe. That name echoed in his mind like a melody he hadn't heard before, but somehow couldn't forget. Her voice, soft and unsure, her eyes wide, brown, and stormy with panic. Her entire presence had been like a gust of warm air in a locked room. She hadn't tried to impress him. She hadn't even known him. And that was terrifyingly rare. Across the hotel, Lila buried her face in a pillow, groaning. You idiot, Lila. The wrong room? Really? She replayed every embarrassing second of the night, from stumbling through the door to the moment she fled like a scared rabbit. But beneath the humiliation pulsed a strange feeling, one she couldn't name, a curiosity, a flutter, a heat that sparked in her chest when she remembered his deep voice and those piercing blue eyes. She sat up, running her fingers through her damp hair. Get over it. You'll never see him again. Fate, however, had other plans. The next morning, Lila stood in the hotel lobby, clutching her resume in a manila folder. Her heels clicked nervously on the marble floor. She checked the time. 2 hours until her interview. Enough time to grab a coffee and calm her racing heart. She turned toward the cafe and smacked right into someone's chest. Oh my gosh, I'm so sore. She froze. He froze too. Ethan stood there in a charcoal suit. No tie, looking every bit the cover of a billionaire lifestyle magazine. But his expression, equally stunned. Lila? His voice was a husky question. Lila's cheeks flared crimson. Hi, she mumbled, half turning to flee again. But Ethan reached out gently and touched her arm. Don't run. Not this time. She hesitated. His touch wasn't forceful. It was careful, controlled. I was actually hoping to run into you, he added, surprising even himself. Her brows lifted. Really? Why? I'm still trying to figure that out, he said honestly, but I owe you a coffee at least. Lila blinked. You don't owe me anything. I don't do things I don't want to, Ethan replied. Please, just 10 minutes. Something about the way he said it, not pushy but sincere, made her nod. Okay, just 10. They sat at the corner table, tucked away from the bustling crowd. Ethan ordered black coffee. Lila nervously went for hazelnut latte with extra cream. I don't usually do this, he said, watching her fidget with the sugar packets. Me neither, she laughed nervously. Usually I only humiliate myself once per city. He smirked, not quite a smile but close. Why are you in New York? He asked, leaning forward. Lila shrugged. Interview at a small publishing firm. They probably won't hire me, but I had to try. Ethan's gaze lingered. Her honesty was so raw, so unlike the rehearsed scripts he usually heard from people who wanted something from him. Across the room, Mason, Ethan's assistant, spotted them and nearly dropped his tablet. The Ethan Cole, having coffee with a woman, smiling, was the apocalypse beginning? Lila stirred her latte. So what do you do? She asked innocently. Ethan paused, tempted to lie, to downplay it. Real estate, he said casually. I build things. She nodded. You must be good at it. You live in that amazing suite. He gave a small laugh. I suppose. No mention of his billion-dollar empire. No name drop. No ego. And still, Lila had no clue that the man sipping coffee across from her was one of the most powerful and untouchable millionaires in the country. She looked at him thoughtfully. "You don't smile much, do you?" Ethan looked up, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "You have one of those faces. Intense. Like the world's too loud and you're just waiting for silence." For the first time in years, Ethan smiled. Not the polite business kind, but something real, small, software. "I guess I've been waiting for something quiet," he admitted. Their eyes locked across the table, and in that moment, with no fancy lighting, no champagne, no pretense, just burnt coffee and nervous laughter, something shifted. She made him feel like a man, not a brand, and she had no idea who he really was. But Ethan was starting to wonder if fate had just handed him the one thing he'd stopped believing in. A reason to smile. Ethan Cole didn't usually offer second chances or dinners. Yet here he was, pacing his penthouse suite, dressed in a tailored navy jacket, checking the time again. It wasn't a date. He'd told himself that. Just a meal. Just a conversation. A way to repay a mistake neither of them really meant to make. Still, why did it feel like something more? Across the hotel, Lila Monroe stood in front of the full-length mirror, tugging nervously at her pale blue blouse. It was the nicest thing she owned that didn't scream interview. Her heart fluttered as she remembered the way Ethan had looked at her in the cafe. Curious, not cold. Gentle, not guarded. But this dinner, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was a dinner with a man she barely knew. And yet, something about him made her feel safe. When she arrived at the rooftop restaurant, Ethan was already there, seated at a private corner table with a view of the sparkling skyline. He stood as she approached, his blue eyes scanning her with a flicker of something he couldn't name. "Hey," she breathed. "Hey," he replied. "You look nice." Lila smiled, cheeks tinged pink. "You too." They sat, menus untouched, as soft jazz played in the background. For a moment, the air between them buzzed with quiet anticipation. Then Ethan broke the silence. "So," he said, swirling the water in his glass, "have you heard back about your interview?" Lila shook her head. "Not yet. Honestly, I don't think I got it. The editor seemed more interested in her phone than my portfolio." Ethan frowned. "They're fools then." She laughed softly. "You don't even know if I'm any good. I know you're brave. Most people wouldn't move to a city like this alone, chasing a dream with no guarantees." The words hit her harder than she expected. Lila looked down at her napkin, fingers tightening. "I didn't really have a choice. My parents passed away 2 years ago. Car accident. After that, I couldn't stay in my hometown. Too many memories. Too much silence." Ethan's heart stilled. He didn't interrupt. She continued, voice trembling. "I've been doing odd jobs, freelance editing, coffee shops, living out of suitcases. This interview was my last shot at something permanent." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then quietly, "You remind me of someone I knew. Someone who fought the world alone. Only difference is, they never had anyone to offer them a hand." She looked up, startled by the softness in his voice. "I'm not offering charity," Ethan said firmly, "but I do need someone to help organize a few ongoing projects. Admin work, flexible hours, good pay. You could take it, short term, until you get on your feet." Lila blinked. "Are you serious?" "I don't do jokes well," he replied. She stared at him, torn. Her pride screamed no. Her reality whispered yes. "I don't want special treatment," she said slowly. "I don't want to be someone you feel sorry for." "I don't feel sorry for you, Lila." His voice dropped to a low murmur. "I admire you." Her breath hitched. That admission, so raw, so unguarded, left her speechless. He leaned back. "Take the weekend to think about it. I won't pressure you." Dinner continued, slower now, more relaxed. Lila asked him more about his work. He offered only hints, never bragging. She sensed layers in him, walls built not from ego but from pain. And somehow he made her laugh more than she had in months. By the time they finished dessert, the moon had risen above the skyline, casting a silvery glow over the city. Ethan walked her to the elevator. Thank you, she said softly. For dinner? For seeing me? He looked at her for a long moment. You're hard not to see. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, turning to look at him one last time. As the doors closed, Ethan remained still, hands in his pockets. She had no idea how deeply she'd already wedged herself into his mind, or how, for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the feeling blooming in his chest. And Lila? She didn't know that this job offer would become the turning point of not only her career, but her heart. The rain came down in sheets, pouring relentlessly from the heavens as if the sky itself had decided to punish the earth. Ethan Cole's sleek black car swerved slightly as the wind howled through the narrow country road, the flash of lightning lighting up the night in eerie bursts. The storm had taken everyone by surprise. No one had predicted this, except maybe the weather gods. Ethan's blue eyes narrowed against the dark road, and he glanced at Lila, sitting beside him, her hand tightly gripping the seatbelt. She looked pale, her features drawn with tension as the rain lashed against the windows like an angry force of nature. They had left the charity gala just a few hours ago, but the storm had grown worse with each passing minute. The highway was flooded in parts, making the usual path to her apartment impossible. Are we going to make it? She asked, voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. Ethan's jaw tightened. We might not, but we'll find somewhere safe. His hand instinctively reached out, trying to reassure her, but she was already staring ahead, lost in thought. In the last few weeks, working closely with Lila had brought them closer in ways Ethan never expected. She was bright, funny, with a softness about her that made his heart ache when she wasn't around. But as the storm raged on, a feeling of unease began to settle in. It wasn't just the rain that unnerved him. It was the quiet distance that had started to grow between them in the past few days. Her hand had begun to linger further away from his, her smiles less frequent. She was pulling back, retreating into herself, and he wasn't sure why. His thoughts were interrupted when the car suddenly slowed to a stop in front of an old rustic cabin. The floodwaters had begun to rise, and there was nowhere else to go. This is it, Ethan said, unbuckling his seatbelt. We'll be safe here until the storm passes. Lila hesitated before following his lead. She grabbed her purse, but something in her posture told him she wasn't fully comfortable with the situation. He couldn't blame her. He wasn't exactly at ease either. The cabin was small but warm, lit only by the soft flicker of candlelight. Ethan went to the small kitchenette and heated some tea while Lila stood by the window, gazing out at the rain that poured down in sheets. The world outside seemed so distant now, as though time had slowed and the noise of the storm had muted everything except the two of them. I didn't expect to be here tonight, Lila murmured, her voice distant. I thought I'd be home by now. Ethan joined her by the window, handing her the tea. He could feel the tension radiating off of her. I know. I'm sorry about this. We could have been home if the storm hadn't caught us. Lila sipped her tea, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Ethan was tempted to break it, but something in her eyes made him pause. The quiet sadness he had noticed in her all week seemed to be magnified now, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was responsible for it somehow. You don't have to be here with me, you know, Lila suddenly said, her voice tight with emotion. I don't want to be a burden. Ethan's heart clenched at the words. You're not a burden, Lila. Her eyes flickered toward him, her expression vulnerable. I know you say that, but I don't think you really understand what it's like to feel disposable. She took a shaky breath. I'm terrified of being used like my mom was. She gave everything to my father, and in the end, he just walked away. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be someone's second choice or some mistake they make in a moment of weakness. Her words hung in the air, fragile and raw, and Ethan felt the weight of them settle deep in his chest. He had never known the full story behind her past, but now he was beginning to understand the depth of her fears. She wasn't just scared of being hurt, she was terrified of being discarded. You're not like your mother, Lila, Ethan said quietly, his voice low. He stepped closer, his gaze softening. You're strong, and you deserve more than that. But Lila pulled away, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and doubt. I don't know what I'm doing here, Ethan. I don't want to just fall into something because I'm lonely, or because you're being kind. I don't want to be something temporary in your life. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time he understood the weight of the wall she had built around herself. She wasn't just pushing him away. She was protecting herself from something far deeper than just him. I never wanted you to think I was just being kind, he said, stepping forward again. His voice softened, the distance between them becoming almost unbearable. I know it's hard to trust people, especially after what you've been through, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I want to take this slow, Lila. I want to show you that I care, and I'm willing to wait for as long as it takes. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she met his eyes. Those deep blue eyes that seemed to see through her, past the walls, past the fear. For a moment it felt as though the storm outside had faded completely, leaving only the two of them in that quiet cabin. Her voice faltered. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Ethan reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. You don't have to be ready. You just have to know that I'm here, and I'll wait. In that moment, the tension between them softened, the air crackling with something new, something real. The storm outside raged on, but inside, for the first time, it felt like they were both beginning to find shelter in each other. The morning sun shone bright through the windows of Ethan's penthouse, but there was an unnatural weight in the air. Ethan Cole, usually calm and composed, stood by his desk, his blue eyes narrowed as he scrolled through his phone, unable to believe what he was reading. The headline on the article sent a chill through him. Millionaire's New Love, Gold Digger or True Love. The article was a hit piece, accusing Lila Monroe of using Ethan for his wealth and status. It painted a picture of her as a woman who'd seduced her way into the millionaire's world, desperate to claw her way to the top. It wasn't just cruel, it was malicious. And it wasn't true. Lila's face was plastered all over the media now, her image twisted into something it wasn't. The woman who had touched his life in the deepest, most unexpected ways was being reduced to a cheap tabloid stereotype, and it felt like his heart had been ripped out of his chest. It didn't take long for Ethan to piece together who was behind the article. Vanessa Blackwell, his ex-fiancée, had always been vindictive. But this was different. She had always resented Lila for her innocence, for making Ethan question everything he thought he knew about love. And now she was making sure Lila paid the price. Ethan slammed the phone down on the desk, rage flooding him in waves. That bitch, he muttered under his breath. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment on the outskirts of New York, Lila sat on her bed, her hands shaking as she stared at her phone. The message notifications flooded in, texts from people she barely knew, asking if the rumors were true, if she was really after Ethan's money. A few cruel comments from strangers appeared on her social media, questioning her worth, calling her a gold digger. The world she had worked so hard to build in New York was crumbling. Her new job, the one that had given her hope and purpose, was now in jeopardy. Her boss had already called, telling her the company's PR department was handling the fallout. Lila knew that this scandal would leave a permanent stain on her reputation, whether it was true or not. The worst part? Ethan hadn't even reached out to her yet. The weight of everything was suffocating. She felt small and insignificant, a pawn in a game she didn't even understand. Her worst fear was coming true. She had become disposable, just like her mother once had. But before she could spiral further, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ethan. His words were a blur of anger, concern, and frustration. He was furious, demanding to know where she was, to meet him, to talk. But Lila couldn't bring herself to respond. She didn't want to be the woman who clung to him, who became a scandalous afterthought in his life. She didn't want to be just another fleeting moment for a man who could never truly love her, not without the world's expectations weighing down on them. Ethan had everything to lose, and she couldn't be the one to drag him down. She locked her phone and stood up, pacing her small room. The decision was made. She couldn't stay in New York, not now, not with everything hanging over her like a storm cloud. She needed to leave. She needed to disappear from the noise, the lies, and the pain. Without a second thought, Lila packed a small bag and slipped out of her apartment, never looking back. The day passed in a blur of emotions for Ethan. He had tried to call her, text her. even show up at her apartment. But there was no answer. He had no idea where she had gone, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. For the first time in years, something inside him shifted, something deeper than anger or frustration. He was scared, scared of losing her. He had always guarded his emotions, closed himself off from vulnerability after the betrayal Vanessa had left him with. But Lila had changed that. She had seeped into his life and his heart, and now when he needed her most, she was gone. He stormed into his assistant's office, his fists clenched. "Where the hell is she, Natalie? I need to find her." His assistant, a sharp woman who had been with him for years, looked at him with a mixture of confusion and concern. "I don't know, Mr. Cole. She's gone. I've checked with her friends and no one's heard from her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Find her. I don't care what it takes." Meanwhile, Lila sat in a small cafe just outside the city, staring blankly at her tea. She had taken a train north, leaving the city and the noise behind. But now, sitting in the quiet town, the weight of her decision began to settle in. Her heart ached, and she felt a heavy emptiness inside her. What had she done? "Excuse me." Lila looked up and was met by the warm, kind face of an older woman who had been sitting at the next table. The woman smiled softly, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "I couldn't help but notice that you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," the woman said gently, sitting down across from her. "You know, I once felt the same way. When I was your age, I had lost everything and thought I could never go on." Lila hesitated but found herself speaking. "It's complicated. I've made a mistake, and now I've ruined everything." The woman shook her head, her silver hair glinting in the light. "We all make mistakes, dear. The important thing is not to let them define us. Don't let your pride stop you from living. Love isn't a fairy tale, but it's worth fighting for. Don't let fear steal it from you." Lila blinked, surprised by the wisdom in the stranger's words. "But what if I'm not enough? What if I'm just a mistake for him?" The woman smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "Love is never about being perfect. It's about being real. And you, my dear, are more than enough." Lila felt a lump in her throat. The woman's words cut through her walls like a gentle breeze. She wasn't sure what to do next, but she knew she couldn't let pride dictate her choices anymore. Back in New York, Ethan sat in his penthouse just staring at his phone, his mind racing. The storm inside him raged on, and he knew he couldn't lose her. Not like this. He took a deep breath, his fingers tapping against the screen as he typed a message to Lila. His heart was on the line, and there was no turning back. "I don't care about the article. I care about you. Please don't shut me out. Let me help you. Let me be there." As he hit send, he knew this wasn't just about fixing a scandal. It was about fixing what had broken inside of him. He wasn't going to let her go. Not this time. The morning light filtered through the windows of Ethan Cole's penthouse. But for the first time in years, he didn't care about the view. The skyline of New York, with its endless possibilities and ambitions, meant nothing to him today. His thoughts were consumed by one thing, and one thing only: Lila. He had spent the last few days in a haze of frustration and regret. Every attempt to contact her had gone unanswered, and each hour without news felt like an eternity. Ethan Cole was a man who controlled everything in his life: his businesses, his employees, his reputation. But this was something he couldn't fix with money or power. His assistant, Natalie, had been watching him carefully for the last few days, noticing the change in his demeanor. "Mr. Cole," she finally ventured after Ethan canceled his third consecutive meeting that morning. This isn't like you. You're the one who's always in control." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his phone again, scrolling through the last message he had sent Lila. His chest tightened. He had told her he didn't care about the scandal, that he cared about her. But what if it was too late? What if she had already walked away from him forever? The idea made his stomach churn. But as he sat there, his mind drifting between thoughts of guilt and hope, he made a decision. He wasn't going to wait any longer. He couldn't. Lila had hoped the quiet town would give her the peace she needed, but the days that passed only served to make her feel more and more alone. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see Ethan's blue eyes, filled with anger, fear, and something else she couldn't quite place. And despite everything, she missed him. Missed the way he made her feel safe, the way he made her laugh even when things were tough. She wasn't sure what had pushed her to take that train ride out of the city, to run from everything she had once dreamed of. But now with each passing day, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Lila was working her shift at the local flower shop when she first saw him. She had just arranged a bouquet of roses, her hands moving mechanically when the bell above the door jingled. She didn't look up, assuming it was just another customer, but then she heard his voice, software measured, filled with something that sent a shock through her veins. Lila. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. She knew that voice. Ethan. Slowly she turned, expecting her eyes to deceive her. But there he was, standing at the door of the small, rustic flower shop, looking exactly as he always did. Immaculate in his tailored suit, his blue eyes dark with something she couldn't decipher. But there was no trace of the arrogant, distant man who had once seemed so untouchable. This man was different. He didn't have flowers in his hands or jewelry. He didn't even have a suitcase with him, ready to whisk her away to some lavish vacation. He only held a small, folded envelope. Her pulse quickened. Ethan, what are you? He cut her off gently, taking a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I know you're angry with me. I know you're hurt, but I need you to listen. He swallowed hard, his voice cracking slightly. I never believed in love, Lila. Not truly. Not until you walked into my life. By mistake. Lila's breath caught. The words felt surreal, like something out of a dream. She had never expected to hear this from him. Ethan Cole, the man who had always been so closed off, so guarded, was standing in front of her, pouring out his heart. He extended the envelope toward her. This is for you. It's not much, but it's the only thing I can give you right now. An apology. Lila hesitated. Her eyes flickered between the envelope and his face. The letter. It was so simple, so unlike the extravagant gestures she had imagined he might offer. It wasn't diamonds or flowers, it was just words. She reached out slowly, taking the letter from him, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest of moments. She opened it, unfolding the paper carefully. The letter read, Lila, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I've hurt you, for not being the man you deserve. You showed me a kind of love that I never thought was possible. I thought I had it all figured out, but you made me realize that life isn't about control. It's about the moments that take us by surprise, the ones that make us feel alive. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that you're the first person I've ever wanted to fight for. I never believed in love until I met you, until you stumbled into my life in the most unexpected way. I don't want to lose you. I can't. Ethan. Lila's hand trembled as she finished reading the letter. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to be so raw, so vulnerable. And for the first time, she felt something shift within her, something she had been too scared to acknowledge. Ethan was still standing there, watching her closely. His eyes were full of hope, but there was also an undercurrent of fear, as if he feared the very thing he had just given her, the words, the apology, might not be enough. I don't know what to say, Lila whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan took a cautious step forward, closing the distance between them. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. She shook her head slightly, still processing everything he had said. But I'm not like the women you're used to, Ethan. I'm not experienced. Her voice faltered, and she couldn't finish the sentence. He reached out, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. His voice was soft, but filled with determination. You're exactly who I've been waiting for. You're the only woman I've ever wanted to wait for. Lila's breath hitched, and for the first time since their paths had crossed, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be real. That it could be simple, pure, and true. The walls she had built around her heart, walls forged from fear and insecurity, began to crumble as she looked into Ethan's eyes. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about finding someone who saw you for who you were, who accepted every piece of you, innocence, flaws, and all. And in that moment, she let herself believe that love might just be the one thing in the world worth waiting for. The grand ballroom shimmered beneath a canopy of chandeliers, their golden light casting a magical glow on the guests below. Ethan stood near the stage, adjusting his navy tuxedo, his heart racing, not with nerves from speaking to hundreds, but with something far deeper: love. Across the room, Lila entered slowly, unaware of the night's true purpose. Dressed in a soft blue gown that hugged her curves with effortless grace, she looked like a vision, so beautiful it took his breath away. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Ethan, and when they met his gaze, her lips curved into a gentle, unsure smile. The orchestra lowered its melody as Ethan took the microphone. The room hushed. "I used to think love was weakness," he said, his voice steady yet thick with emotion. "Then a shy girl opened the wrong door and showed me it was the strongest thing I'd ever feel." Gasps echoed softly around the room, but Lila only stared, frozen in place. Her hand clutched her chest, trembling. Ethan stepped down from the stage and walked toward her with purpose, stopping just a breath away. "You changed me, Lila," he said, dropping to one knee as the crowd held their breath. "You walked into my life by mistake. Will you walk into forever by choice?" Tears welled in her eyes. Her voice cracked through her smile. "Yes," she whispered, and the room erupted in applause. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger as if he'd waited his entire life for that moment. As he rose, their lips met in a tender kiss, one that spoke of healing, hope, and heartbeats finally in sync. What started as an accident had become their fate, and in that ballroom, beneath glittering lights and teary eyes, a miracle was made.